On the 21st of July 1969, at 2 hours 56 minutes and 20 seconds GMT, Neil Armstrong stepped onto the surface of the moon and uttered the famous phrase heard around the world.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The moon landing marked a significant victory for Americans, who had been lagging behind the Soviets in the space race. Soviet scientists and engineers had previously achieved the first human orbit of Earth with Yuri Gagarin and later sent the first human into open space, Alexei Leonov. Since then, a total of 12 American astronauts have visited the moon. No one else from any other country has. This fact has fueled one of the most famous conspiracy theories. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin never actually landed on the moon, and that all photos and videos of their landing were staged by the US government with support from NASA, the CIA, and Hollywood to claim victory in the space race. Hello, dear friends. In today's video, we will examine and debunk the moon landing conspiracy. But before we begin, we'd like to ask you to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon to stay updated on our new interesting videos about the mysteries of the universe. Sometimes, conspiracy theorists resemble people patching up a dam. You poke a hole in their theory here and there. Done. Water starts flowing. But no, for every such fact they have counter-arguments that plug the holes, and soon their dam becomes a patchwork quilt, no longer forming a coherent theory on its own. When you agree to such a debate, know that you're being drawn into exhaustion. It's like stepping into quicksand, rather being pulled into it. So what can you do? It's very simple. You need to ask for a detailed description of how it was done, from the very beginning. Let's do that ourselves. What shall we name our operation to deceive the Soviets and the world? Apollo doesn't fit. It's a noble strongman. Let's pick something else. How about Dolos? Yeah, why not? Sounds cool. So, history tells us that the Apollo program was conceived under Eisenhower and urgently approved by Kennedy, who, amidst Yuri Gagarin's flight in May 1961, addressed Congress requesting NASA's funding of $9 billion to surpass USSR by 1970. Let's think from scratch. Who could have initiated the conspiracy in this situation? NASA? Unlikely. There's a whole complex of negative motivations here. Professional ethics and pride in past industry achievements. The fathers of American astronautics had already achieved orbital flights, and any suggestion like, let's not bother and just film the moon in Hollywood in such a specialized collective is a declaration of professional incompetence. Initiative from some minister. Same professional inadequacy and resignation. Besides, advices would be listened to regardless, as it's a serious industry issue and simultaneously a matter of political prestige. Various ministries, departments, and the government would all get involved, and convincing everyone would be far from easy. Perhaps Congress? Public hearings on funding a conspiracy? That's not serious, and is not mentioned in history. Therefore, the only state figure with enough influence and means to carry out such an operation from start to finish would be the President of the United States. Excellent. Let's assume we have an adventurous president, and in 1961, Kennedy squandered $9 billion on movies about the moon. Seems simple, right? Just shoot the landing process on sets. But it's not that straightforward. Let's list what exactly we need to film. Firstly, the live broadcasts from the spacecraft. Apollo 11 had live insertions on the way there and back. In the early days, there were 2 unscheduled transmissions, 16 and 50 minutes each. One planned 35-minute transmission on the second day, and 1 hour 36 minutes on the third. Then, there were transmissions from lunar orbit to show the surface. On the way back, they did transmissions where the spacecraft rotated to show Earth and the Moon in opposite windows, and one final transmission with triumphant words of thanks, and in the middle, those famous shots from the external camera, including not only the iconic step for mankind, but also communication with President Nixon. Wait, what? Nixon? Yes, tragically assassinated, Kennedy wouldn't have been able to enjoy the fruits of his fake lunar program, Dolos. Moreover, there was also Lyndon Johnson, who took the oath of office aboard an airplane. Here comes the first logical bifurcation. Either the Apollo program was genuine and progressing smoothly, or our Dolos program managed to survive the succession of 3 presidents without much effort. This only reinforces the suspicion that the conspiracy was orchestrated at the highest levels and rooted deeply. To present a fake broadcast to the world without involving the president directly, this is simply the galactic scam of the millennium. But we've digressed slightly. Yes, we need to film the movie in Hollywood. Although no, it's better to shoot the staged landing at a secret CIA studio with the president, a scene about the lunar module landing, close-ups of the moon, distant shots of Earth with all realistic angles and simulated weightlessness. And it must look realistic because the level of moon landing filmmaking at that time was approximately like this. So considering the director, cameraman, and other film crew, we already have a minimum of 10 people involved in our plan. We can shoot closed shooting in some way, but people will still be involved. But in reality, the technical complexity lies entirely elsewhere. Do you often receive signals from lunar orbit? Probably not. Television channels, for instance, can't even catch signals transmitted by a spacecraft traveling between Earth and the Moon. And in the half-century since the Apollo program, this situation has hardly changed. There are only 3 devices in the world capable of this: 70-meter colossal radio telescope for deep space communication. 2 of them are Soviets and 1 is American. It was this American telescope that received those transmissions from hundreds of thousands of kilometers away from the tiny spacecraft, and it stands in the Mojave Desert in California. So what can be said about this? Since all communication goes through this telescope, it's the perfect place to execute Project Dolos. We found an opportunity to place our films, shots, and audio recordings on a reel-to-reel player and broadcast them to Houston via radio and television to the whole world. Well, big deal. Just a couple dozen more people from the observatory staff will learn about Project Dolos. In principle, organizing a rocket show for Project Dolos isn't that difficult. Most viewers won't distinguish between a Saturn V and a Soviet Vostok. They can be handed anything metal and elongated, claiming it's a lunar rocket. Then it sinks somewhere far away in the ocean after launch, so it's out of sight from Cape Canaveral. But here's the catch: the Houston Mission Control Center. Imagine a massive control room with huge screens, where live broadcasts from the launch pad and the spacecraft interlace with dozens of continuous telemetry data streams, altitude, speed, pressure, emergency sensors, and all this from a real spacecraft. You can't just disregard all this. The mission control team would quickly find out that no one was on shift in Houston on launch day, so we need to simulate activity for these dozens of people too. In principle, we could recruit them and make them work for our conspiracy. In the end, our plan will involve over 100 people. Or, to keep this secret, we could make them work with fake broadcasts and fake telemetry. What do you think? To engage dozens of high-class specialists, how accurate should the fake telemetry be? However, there is still another option. We could build a real spacecraft. Then the specialists in Houston wouldn't be deceived, and the number of people involved in Project Dolos would be just a few dozen again. We initiated a fake moon program, Dolos, for which we will inevitably have to use the existing infrastructure of our industry, if only because the whole world is paying attention to the event. We will use the Kennedy and Johnson Space Centers, as well as the Goldstone Deep Space Communication Center. We'll need telemetry from the spacecraft and the launch vehicle for a dramatic launch, at least into Earth orbit. As a result, we conclude that at this stage, we simply have to do everything for real, and it will be more effective, easier, and won't require involving hundreds of people in conspiracy's secrets. Saturn V is a composite construction. The first stage was developed by Boeing, the second by NAA, the third by Douglas. Each of them had smaller subcontractors, like Beech Aircraft, who once failed with the oxygen tank thermostat voltage on the Apollo 13 command module, leading to wiring failure and an explosion. And what? All of these companies should be instructed to develop a lunar module mock-up that would involve hundreds more people who know.
I poured ball bearings into the third stage adapter, and now they're on TV talking about astronauts flying there.
This isn't about top managers. These are professional designers. engineers, ordinary specialists. They couldn't care less about politicians' imperial ambitions or the risk of losing prestigious jobs, for example, at NASA. Do you feel the absurdity level rising? To simulate a moon landing, the launch vehicle must be fully capable of achieving escape velocity, a requirement not previously needed for heavy manned spacecraft, and the spacecraft must have everything necessary for landing and taking off from the lunar surface. This theater of the absurd becomes even more insane if we add even one stage of falsification, involving dozens or even thousands of people. What if the United States gets caught in the mud in the moon race and Project Dolos is exposed? So what about our Dolos program? It started off so well, making a film and showing it to the whole world, but it turns out it's all much more difficult than expected. Yet there remains one small loophole. Why do we need to risk lives? Let's do everything for real. We'll indeed need the $9 billion from Kennedy and 4 years of development, innovative lunar modules, and a heavy launch vehicle. But this whole system is too complex. Extravehicular activity is very dangerous, and as we realized earlier, prestige really matters. Let's orbit the moon. But for the landing and all the broadcast material, let's fake it. Everything should go smoothly the first time. People shouldn't die or get hurt. However, there's a simple question remaining. What's the point of this entire program then? We'll spend money and time without ever setting foot on the moon. Neil Armstrong nearly died testing the lunar lander here on Earth. Why test it if they're not going to use it? Is human safety crucial for us? Literally, the very first Apollo mission, Apollo 1, burned up on the launch pad during preparations, claiming the lives of Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee. Why wasn't the program shut down? All right, we must carry out the Dolos program at all costs, even if it no longer makes any sense. Let's recap the program's agenda. Conduct a manned flight to the moon, simulate a surface landing. Given the mission's global attention, to avoid embarrassment, we'll inject false telemetry data into the broadcast, along with footage of the surface exit and interviews with Nixon. Later on, we'll release fake photos and film footage. But before that, we need to bring the astronauts back to Earth. However, the first thing to return to Earth will be lunar soil, regolith. Scientists from various countries and institutes are already lining up to study it. However, we won't be able to just grab soil from NASA's backyard this time. Regolith doesn't resemble any earthly material. Is it really from the moon? How did they collect 46 pounds of soil without landing on the surface? And that's not even considering the delivery of the retroreflectors still in use today. If I were in charge of the Dolos program, I'd shut it down for its senseless redundancy. Its complexity is comparable to a real lunar program, with potentially far more problems. It doesn't explain why fake broadcasts weren't used earlier with the Apollo 8 or Apollo 10 missions, nor why we needed to take 6 more risk flights over 13 years. Moreover, we'd need at least several dozen informed individuals. How would we keep them silent then? $1 million and a box of candy each? Everything else is just details. The Apollo program was indeed a great adventure, which demanded tremendous effort and even lives. So let's not make fun of those who developed, built, and faced the harshest of all environments, the cosmic space. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our new videos about the mysteries of our planet and the universe. Leave a comment about what you'd like to learn in the next video. Thank you, and see you next time